Hi folks, you were Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and excuse me, thank you for joining this radio audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about what, in terms of Britain at least, was probably the early stages of the early onset of race hustling, of preparing the way ahead for Britain to become much more black than it was, which was about almost zero black in the late 50s and early 1960s. Now, there's a movie, for those who haven't seen it, there was a movie made in the 1960s called To Sir With Love, starring Sidney Poitier and various other local English actors and singers and the like. The movie is about a black man who is supposedly an engineer, and he can't find work in England because of evil, whitey, bad prejudice. So he takes the only job he can, which is a school teacher in a very slum, working class, very poor area of London, and probably one of the poorest areas of the country. And he is a teacher there, and he shows those dumbass white kids how to, he teaches them respect and how not to be racists and not to be Nazis and so on. So, and Sidney Poitier is there wearing very sharp suits, immaculately presented, very well spoken, and there's no reality or anything in this. It's all, even the novelist Braithwaite said that he thought it was way over the top in the sentimentality stakes. Nonetheless, let's have a look at it. It comes across as pure propaganda. I mean, when I first saw it when I was a kid, it was sort of, okay, it was the theme song was pretty decent, and so I sort of, it was kind of kids' entertainment, and I didn't really think about the racist or race element or angle of it. It was just like, okay, it was a movie. I see it, of course, differently now, given the hysterical propaganda that's pushed at us in the white countries, pushed at white people in the white countries 24/7. Notice none of this race hustling and gender hustling goes on in China or Japan or Africa or something like that. It's only in the white countries where we have to put up with this hysterical nonsense. Anyway, coming back to the movie now, the movie is based on a book. It was written by a black guy. It's actually somewhat autobiographical. He was a teacher in London, and he did write a book. For some reason, the book was picked up, and the decision was made to make a movie out of it. Now, if you look at the book, it's certainly not great writing. It's got, in my opinion at least, nothing going for it. It's an ordinary, mundane, rather fanciful account of the situation, but it does offer a platform for preaching race hustling. And so this was identified early. It's not great writing. It's not a great novel. It was not a successful novel, not even a great story for that matter. But it is a useful propaganda platform, and it seems to have been seized on. This is in the 1960s for that. Now, at that time, there weren't many black people in Britain, and nearly all the black people that came to Britain were people with only a few years' education. They weren't sophisticated, well-spoken people. Now, this guy, Eustace Braithwaite, he was a black guy from British Guiana, which is in South America. It's up on the north coast of the South American, near Venezuela, around there. And it was a dirt poor tribal basket case. The minute the British sort of started to organise to leave, the local goons and heavies and so on decided to grab whatever goodies they could for themselves. Now, Braithwaite's parents were supposedly both educated at Oxford, and what the British did when they were getting ready to leave a particular place is they would try and quickly put together a middle class and governing middle class, if you will, of administrators and the like. And so they would start grabbing people if they thought anyone had even the slightest sort of spark in them and might somehow make the conversion over to administering a public service and becoming a senior public servant, or I don't know, high school headmasters. They would try and identify those people as much through temperament, or maybe they were slightly brighter than the others, and they'd give them affirmative action degrees. So they'd go to Oxford or Cambridge, and they'd give them these. So it's a very early stage or process of affirmative action is how do you build up a class of people, because the white folks are all going to go, so you need to have people, leave people behind, or at least make a go of it. Now, the population of British Guiana was less than 1 million. I think it's still less than 1 million today. So it's not very populous. There's vast areas of rainforest, really. And recently, a lot of oil's been discovered off the coast there, so that they're doing okay now. Their standard of living has tripled since oil was discovered only 10 years ago. So their things have changed drastically. But the time this was on, Time Braithwaite, the writer of the novel To Sir with Love, it was a dirt poor basket case country. The British were packing up to leave, and his parents were selected as, if you like, the new big bourgeoisie. And so both of them got supposedly at least an Oxford degree, bit more shadowy with his mother. So Eustace Braithwaite, the guy who writes the novel, he's surrounded by what he terms education and books and learning and so on. That may or may not have been the case, but he spoke English, a very basic form of English when he came to England. But he spoke a form of Creole, really, kind of a pidgin English that you can't really, you'd struggle to understand and follow, and they speak it quite quickly. So you'd need to be giving it an attention. So he arrives in England with some sort of engineering degree, and he's also allegedly been a pilot in the Second World War, like a fighter pilot of some sort. This is a bit vague. I don't know what he was doing there. Given his age, he'd have been in his late 30s when World War II broke out. That wasn't the age that you had pilots. You might have pilots, as in pilots flying planes with cargo or something like that, maybe a training pilot. But this idea that he was a daredevil fighter pilot his age, that's very, very unlikely. Very unlikely indeed. So anyway, he's given an affirmative action engineering degree, goes away, then comes back to England in the late 1950s, early 1960s. It's not clear why he's there. His parents, like his father's supposedly like a senior mining engineer, and again, part of the elite in Guyana, doing very nicely, thank you. And so he doesn't need to leave. He can live quite a good quality life in Guyana, but he decides to come to Britain. And he, even though he's been to Britain before, he's supposedly got his degree and all this sort of stuff, and was in the Air Force. So he comes back to Britain in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and he can't find work. Now this seems a bit odd. Why does he come back to Britain? He talks about, it's a land of opportunity, and I wanted to. This is sort of where it was all happening, and I wanted to be there, and I thought there'd be plenty of opportunity. He talks like a child, as if he has no understanding of Britain, even though he's been there to study and serve in the Air Force. So there's something not right there. That doesn't quite fit. And again, why would he come to me? He doesn't need to work. His family's got enough money and he doesn't have to work if he doesn't want to. He applies for engineering jobs, even though he's supposed to be very well qualified, at a time when unemployment was like 1 or 2%, and that's genuine 1 or 2%. These aren't people who are being kids being pushed into senior high school just as child minding. This is very low unemployment, and he just can't get a job at all in any sort of engineering capacity, even as a junior engineer or a technical drawing guy or something like that. And there's a lot of jobs around in this sort of thing, but he can't get any. That to me just seems very strange. But it's written off. Well, that just proves what a fucking bunch of evil Nazi racists the British were back then. So he somehow gets offered a job as a teacher. Now, not a teacher teaching a technical subject, which is an engineer. You think he'd go to a high school and he'd be teaching, metalwork or something that's got, an engineering aspect to it. But he's some sort of a general teacher, like a general activities teacher, which seems odd. So he's given the classes that the white teachers don't want to have anything to do with. Now, Sidney Poitier is a very well spoken, superbly well dressed guy. That's not how this Braithwaite guy was. Again, he spoke with a heavy accent in the pidgin English. He looked and sounded, behaved, and acted very differently. And to kids who are used to only white teachers, this would have been something of a shock. The idea that he taught them respect and so on, even in those days, and even in those sort of slum areas, the kids still called the teachers sir, and this is to sir with love, and that was when I was a kid, especially in the private schools, they did that, and I was surprised when I went to a government school for the first time. The teachers weren't called sir. They name Mr. Smith or Jones or something. But anyway, this guy supposedly was teaching all these white kids about respect and how not to be racist. The movie indicates that the white kids were all racists, or most of them were, the most prominent ones were. And again, it's done in caricature. It's ridiculous, over the top depiction of what the racism is. The teachers, not so much, other teachers. And the female teachers in particular seem to be, very, very much supportive of the idea of having a black teacher. But anyway, maybe it's the teachers' unions thing. But having a look at the movie as propaganda, the book is, in my opinion, very poor literature. There's no way that it would merit a movie or that would come to the attention unless it was seen as a propaganda platform. There's no way this guy got the degrees that he did outside of affirmative action. And after he's got his engineering degrees, he goes back to university. And again, he comes from a wealthy family, so he doesn't have to support himself. And he does, he gets a degree in physics and then goes on to get a master's in physics. Again, that's got to be affirmative action. It's hard to believe that it was done outside of affirmative action. So we're looking at a black guy talking pidgin English, looking very unimpressive. Certainly nowhere as sharp and photogenic as Sidney Poitier in the movie, not even close. Who's written an ordinary book that somehow wins awards and then is turned into a movie. Which is really delivering race hustling propaganda. Now, there are a few other movies less well known that were around at the time, and they really sort of took the same sort of thing. They tried to depict black people as being super urbane, very well spoken, very sharp dressers, highly qualified, better qualified than any white person, and that were being treated with discrimination. But that's not the black people that were coming to England then. People who were that urbane and so on were, well, firstly the offspring of the wealthy Africans or wealthy people from the British Commonwealth or Empire or whatever. So they weren't, but the majority of people who were coming to England, nearly all of them, like 99.9%, were peasant type black people. They weren't the high quality stuff. So that in the movies you see these super urbane black people who are quite rightfully, by the way, complaining they're being treated with disdain or with racism when in fact they're superbly well qualified and educated and this and well spoken, well dressed, well everything. But that's not the black people who were coming. That's an idiotic depiction of something that was a complete aberration. 1 in 1,000 black people were that. The people coming from the Caribbean islands, Jamaica and all that sort of thing, they were peasants. They weren't those sort of They weren't the urbane and the super well dressed, and the ones that were, again, came from wealthy families who were only in England temporarily and would go back to wherever they came from, as indeed this guy ended up. He ended up going back to Guyana, and I think he was their representative to the United Nations, and he got various cosy government jobs, again through his well-connected family and so on, his wealthy, well-connected family. So when you look, I see the whole thing really as the onset of propaganda and the onset of race hustling, and these were the early, somewhat clumsy, these were the early attempts at doing. So that book was seized upon. Look, we can use this as some race hustling propaganda, and we can launch into that and tell all these white people how evil, Nazi, racist they. It's this sort of thing. And redemption is just around the corner. If only you'll stop being a damn fucking racist. And that's how I see it. But I'll be interested in seeing your opinions below. But we're looking at a very ordinary book that you'd be lucky if it even got published. It's given the quality of it, and so we're seeing, I think, the if you like, the very early iteration of the deep state race hustling type thing. Looking at this, we can use this. You've been a Tassus today, a Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.